Today, we get to see improvements in Windows BitLocker key and policy management with Tanium. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. And if you're a Windows engineer, this show is for you. BitLocker encryption is a key responsibility. Get the key right, little pun there. Key responsibility for both ops and security. Tanium has provided tools in this area for years now. And, we commonly say on this show that your feedback drives enhancements. And today, we're going to deliver on that. We're going to show you some big new features that you asked for. But before we get into that new BitLocker enhancement, I want to show you a new area in our Tanium community designed for noobs. That's right. I know I've had this feeling sometimes when I'm online and I'm new to a particular technology, and I kind of feel awkward asking very beginner questions. So what we've done is we have carved out a section now within community. It's called new users or novices, and I want to show you here's how to get to it. So first of all, you go to help.tanium.com. Hopefully you're already going there for a lot of the questions that you have for docs and discussions. So under there, I'm going to go to jump to Titans community. And then this is the new Tanium Titans community that we announced at Converge 2024. And under here, you can see there's featured discussions, and I can scroll down there, and there's also a more topics area. I can hit new Tanium user here, or I can hit more topics, either one. And it's going to take me in. Here's all the featured discussion areas. And if you're not aware, if you're not a regular Titans community user, notice these are all the different channels, so to speak. Like if you're in Discord, for example, or Slack, and you're used to channels, these are the channels in the Tanium community for discussion. So I'm going to go to new Tanium user. And then here we have the new Tanium user or the novice discussion area, right? And so by default, when it comes in, you're going to see it's filtered to top questions. You could also change the latest posts, whatever there. So you can see what other peers are asking right now, what's really hot in those conversations. And if you want to ask your own, you just click here for more. And now you're inside the thread here of the Tanium novice community, and you can ask the community a question and go ahead and jump right in. Put your question in there because we would love to help you get the help you need. Now, this is not just Tanium employees. This is partners. This is other Tanium users like you who are learning Tanium and able to help one another. And when you do that, that contributes to your Titans badges. So you get points that rack up by asking and answering questions, and you'll see those Titan badges appear in your profile. So I just wanted to make sure that all of our new users today watching the show are aware of this resource. Go check it out. So now let's get to those BitLocker enhancements. Help me welcome my friend Tim for his first time on the show. I was thinking, has Tim not been on the show yet? Have you not gotten a chance to meet Tim yet? You got to meet Tim. He's our Enforce guy. So Tim, please introduce yourself for our audience.
Hey, thanks, Ashley. It's good to be here. Yeah, I was a bit surprised that it was my first time on the show. So it's one of those I'm a longtime viewer, first time participant on the show. But I've actually been at Tanium for almost 7 years. I think I started either the same week or the week after you did at Tanium. So my first week was at a big conference, internal conference, and I was drinking from the fire hose. So, but even though I've been here 7 years, a lot of times I still feel very much like a noob. And so that Titan community looks pretty interesting to me. I've had many different roles at Tanium. I've been a field TM. I've been a subject matter expert. I helped launch the first version of our deploy module. And then I moved over to product management of quite a few years ago. And I've worked on several products over the years, including products like Tanium Client Management, Direct Connect, and Enforce. And I've been on Enforce since its inception. So the very first idea, the very first builds of Enforce, and I've kind of taken it up to this point. So really excited to show you some new capabilities today.
Well, I'm excited you're here, Tim. And so, because of your history with Enforce from the beginning, I know a lot of customers are big fans of the Enforce module. So, I'd like you to just start for those who maybe weren't even aware that we have BitLocker management capabilities in Tanium. Could you just catch us up? Like, what's the baseline of before we talk about the new stuff? What's the baseline of BitLocker management capabilities in Tanium?
Yeah, so we've had BitLocker capabilities for about 4 years or so within Tanium, and we have had the ability to push out a policy to an endpoint and have that policy force encryption on that endpoint, and so we can manage the encryption capability so that the device gets fully encrypted and meets your corporate standards in terms of the key rotation, meets your corporate standards in terms of encryption strength. And then we also take that encryption key and we back up that recovery key into the Tanium environment so that you have that capability. The capabilities have worked really well. We've got probably over 10 million endpoints currently under management for BitLocker. So it's been a really popular feature. In fact, it continues to be one of the most popular features within our Enforce module.
So I'm curious now, because this has been out for 4 years and it is so popular, I'm guessing we've had plenty of customer feedback. So what kind of things have you heard that drove this innovation that we're going to talk about today?
I mean, as always, as you start to get into more and more customers, you start to run into more edge cases. You start to run into new customers who may not have ever have done BitLocker in the past. Traditionally, we just made the assumption that, everybody that's coming to us has been a Windows admin for a long period of time, but that's not the case in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of ways that our say user interface, our experience was really catered towards like those that have done BitLocker for years, and BitLocker's been around now for probably 18 years at this point in time, and so we wanted
Man, you're
to.
making me sound old.
I
18
know.
years for BitLocker, man. Wow. Yeah, I remember when it came out. So, boy, that takes me a minute to process that. 18
Yeah,
years, man. I feel old and IT now.
yeah. So it's been around for a while, especially like the early beta days. I remember the uh, testing it out. I worked for Microsoft at the time and testing it out on my early systems, and had some pretty nasty experiences with that when it first came out. But it's a really mature technology now. But we wanted to make it easier for customers to get set up, get running, to be able to report on the status and success. And then we also started to run into customers that they need to manage multiple different business units, or they need to manage different departments, and they want to provide more granular control on who can see which recovery keys in the environment. And then we also wanted to enhance the capability to allow users to go and retrieve their own recovery keys. And so if you run into a situation where you had a bad update, or a user inserted a bootable USB drive and they get prompted for their BitLocker recovery key, a user should be able to go out and retrieve that recovery key without necessarily having to involve, say, a help desk call or calling your IT support. So we wanted to enhance that capability as well.
Well, you've given us a great teaser. You've whet my appetite for sure. I'd love to see this, and I'll let you take the order of where you want to start here, because what I heard there was easier management, easier ability to manage those keys, and RBAC, which is RBAC is a very common theme on this show because it applies to so many things. And you're right; these are big asks. So, why don't you take us straight into the demo?
Yeah, sounds good. So the first thing I want to show you is some improvements we've made into viewing our recovery keys. So I'm going down into our module here, and notice we've got a streamlined recovery key page. Now, this was a common ask from a lot of customers that they wanted a very simple page to be able to send their help desk to. So you can literally just copy this URL, give it to your help desk staff. They'll be able to log in. They'll just get to this particular page, and they'll be able to search for and look for recovery keys. So I'm an admin in this particular view, so I have the ability to view all keys. And so you can see this is a little bit of a test environment. So I have a mix between some fake keys and some real keys inside of here. So one of the things that we didn't have in the past was what we call management rights. So going into the RBAC. And so management rights says that if I'm only responsible for, say, 15, 20, 200 machines, I should only see the keys that are associated with those systems. I shouldn't be able to see all the other keys on the system. And so we wanted to provide those management right capabilities into our recovery keys. So I'm going to go up here. I'm logged on with an admin, so I can see all the keys. So I'm going to switch to a persona that I'm just calling limited enforce here. And that's going to limit me in what keys I can see. And so you can see here, I've got just recovery key viewer and my RBAC rights. And so when I look, I have a standard search window that says, hey, what do I want to search for? Do I want to search for computer name, serial number, password ID, or username inside of here? I'm just going to search for Win11. And you can see here that I'm only seeing those systems that I'm specifically granted access to. So if I try to search for some of those other keys, like the fake keys, nothing shows up because I don't have the rights to view those keys. So let me just go back to my Win11 here. And I'm just going to do a show key on this. And in this particular case, I can see the computer name, I can see the recovery key, I can copy this directly to my clipboard, I can share this with my end user. And so I have the ability to get to that key very easily. And keep in mind, I can also search based on the username, I can search on the computer name or this key identifier that you would get from your end user. So this is a great way to give users, so if you're in charge of, say, a department and you want that help desk or that support personnel for that department to only have visibility into the keys within their department, you can set up the proper computer groups, limit the scope of which computer groups those particular users have access to, and then they'll only be able to see the keys that they're responsible for managing.
Oh, Tim, I tell you, this is huge. This is huge, man. So many people asked for this for so long, and we've known that this was a big ask. And so I'm great. I'm so grateful to see this. I was wondering if you could, before you leave that, could you
Yeah.
go back down there? Because I mean, this is a great scoped interface for a support desk situation. On the right side there were some icons of each of those keys. Could you just kind of tell us exactly what each one of those icons does?
Yeah. So the first one here just is copy key. So if I know I just want the key, I don't want to view. So the view, the show key in this particular case just gives me a little bit more detail inside of here, so I can actually see the recovery key on it. But if I don't care about seeing that, I can just click on copy key, and what that will do is take the recovery key and just copy it to my clipboard. The next one here is rotate the key. So if um, uh, a machine and I've viewed the key for this, then I might want to rotate the key because that key has actually been viewed. So I can just click on rotate key and it will send an action down to the endpoint and cause a key rotation on that endpoint. And then you'll see a new key pop up inside of here for that. And then we do have the ability to do the show key. And then the last one is to delete a key. Now, one of the things that we don't do by default is like we don't delete old recovery keys. This is one of those cases where um, if we don't have a key and you need that key, that's bad. That's a bad experience. So you end up bricking a device. And so we want to make sure the keys are available. And so if you want to go through and you want to clean up some old data, you can go ahead and do a delete key on that. But keep in mind, we always do a bit what we call a soft delete. So if you do delete a key, you can go up to show deleted keys here, and you can view all the keys that were deleted that are associated with that particular endpoint in the past. So if you've accidentally deleted something, then you need that recovered key, you can go back and view that information.
How does that interact with rotating a key? Does rotating it like create an automatic deletion entry for the previous one?
Oh, good question. Rotate does not create an automatic deletion of the key. So what you would see is you would see a newer created at view. So usually whenever I go into this view, I just sort by created at and always show me the latest information. But once you've kind of verified that, hey, yes, we've backed up that key, you can just go in and delete those older keys if you want to.
So I know a lot of people use Tanium to manage the actual policies for BitLocker. Could you take us into that now? Because from what I understand, there's some enhancements there as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So let me swap. Um, Let me swap back to my default persona. And I actually want to take you in a little bit different direction before we get into the policy. I want to talk a little bit about how an end user would get the recovery key in the environment. So we've had the concept of a end user recovery portal for quite some time within Tanium Enforce, but it's just been limited to on-prem environments. And the running joke among our support people is that you need a master's degree in BitLocker encryption management in order to set up our recovery key portal. And so what we want to do is make this much easier, but also allow it to work within a Tanium cloud environment. So if I go up here under the settings on Enforce, there's an endpoint encryption, and then there is a tab for encryption key recovery portal. Now, this will be new for a Tanium cloud environment. So this area was always hidden. So in the past, this would only work on Red Hat or CentOS or Rocky, maybe. So we didn't have a broad support for operating systems for this recovery portal. So we wanted to expand on that. And so we'll now fully support any version of Ubuntu. We'll also support Windows as a place for recovery portal. There's still those that like to have Windows servers out there, and so they can have their recovery portal on a Windows box. And so you can see here that I have had several different versions, and I've got a few different recovery portals that are online and offline. Now, the reason why a customer might want to do this is if you want to stand up multiple and you want to say load balance them, you can absolutely stand up multiple recovery key portals, and or you might want to geographically space them so that users will get access to a server that's closer to them, and then they can access those. The other kind of pain point that we had that we wanted to address is in the past you had to download configuration, you had to go to the endpoint where you were installing that, and then you had to do a bunch of manipulation with files on that in order to do things like configure the identity providers that we would use for authentication for the recovery portal. Now we've centralized that so you can configure all your identity providers in one place. And then when we install the recovery portal, then it will synchronize and pull all those identity providers down there. So if I go here, I can see that I've got a few examples of identity providers here where we've got examples with Google and the test.tanium.net's an actually example of an Okta provider. So we're connecting to Okta, but we support the standard SAML or OIDC of a provider. So anything like Okta or Entra ID or Google, any of those can be used as an authentication method to allow your users to authenticate to that. So let me just show you what this would look like if I were to create a new identity provider. So I have a choice. Do I want to do SAML or OIDC? And then I provide the domain name that I want to use. So if I just want to do something like test.com. And then I need the metadata for my SAML provider. In this particular case, I can either upload a file that contains that metadata or point to our URL, and then we'll figure that out automatically. And then we need an attribute to map to the user. So in this particular case, if this was, say, Okta, the attribute would literally just be email. But it could be, if it was Entra ID, it could be the user distinguished name. It could be many other types of things that you want to use for this identity provider. And then you can provide your own branding for this as well. So let's say, let's go back to that example of I have multiple departments or I've got multiple different entities within my organization, and they might have their own branding and they might have their own SAML provider. So if I log on with Tanium.com, I might want to see this particular Tanium logo, but if I log on with like Tanium.dev or something like that, then I might want to see a different logo for that. So you can provide different logos, different icons based on your identity provider. And then once that's all set up, then you've got your identity provider. And then the only thing that is left for you to do is to download your recovery key portal installer. So you click on here and you download and install it. And this is a very simple service that we provide an installation script. And like I said, you can install this on Red Hat, CentOS, Rocky, Ubuntu, or even Windows Server and install it. And this can connect to either an on-prem Tanium environment or can connect up to a Tanium cloud environment.
Wow, this is absolutely amazing. As the longer you're talking, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's a ton of engineering that went in to bridge these gaps that customers have pointed out for years. And we knew just getting started, we had to get a recovery portal out there, and it was on-prem. And you're right, it took a master's degree, but this looks so much easier. Uh, so if I'm understanding this correctly, we just need a server that the customer provides to install this recovery portal. So that could be, not maybe physical servers anymore. It could be a virtual server, but it could even be a server hosted in the cloud, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could take and install this in your own Azure environment or AWS environment. It really doesn't matter as long as it has visibility into your Tanium cloud. It can talk and you can use that. So
This would be a good time to mention that we have docs for all that, how that works, and they're linked in the show notes below. We'll make sure to feature that again at the end.
So let me show you what the recovery portal actually looks like. And what we want to do is provide as simple of a user interface as we can. So users essentially will go, they will log on using the identity provider that you have set up. So they'll just enter in their username and password just like they would, or like we'll fully support like any if you're using Entra ID and you're using Entra ID with MFA or Duo or any other tool, like we will fully support that capability. You just set up your identity provider. We'll go to the identity provider, and however your identity provider is set up, we'll provide that authentication. In this particular case, I've logged on and I've got my logo. This we kept this logo pretty simple because we're just saying, hey, we're using Okta for authentication in this particular case. And now I just have a simple search. So I'm an end user, and I just search for either my recovery key ID or my computer name. And so generally, what will happen is a user will be at their laptop or their desktop, and they'll see a really long string of information that'll say, you need to enter your recovery key, and here's the identifier for this. And it's a long string. Well, we don't make you type in the whole thing. You can just type in the first few letters, and you can specify like how many in this particular case we're doing 4 or more characters, or you can enter in your computer name associated with that as well. And then
All right, so
in
I
this,
got a question right there.
yeah,
I'm just thinking, so a user has authenticated to this site that we've set up, but we don't know necessarily their machine name. So if they're just putting in part of this GUID of the identifier, do they have the ability to search like all the GUIDs in the entire database, or is it somehow scoped to just theirs?
yeah, great question. It is completely scoped to just that particular username. So you saw here, if I go back to my recovery keys in my console here, you can see here that we captured the username of the user who was logged on when we performed the encryption process on the device. And so whenever you set up your identity provider, there was that attribute. And so that attribute, in this particular case, we used an email address attribute. And so those have to match. If those match, then I'm only going to be able to see those keys. So you can see here, I have a few keys that are tied specifically to tim.mcnernatanium.com. And so I just logged on to my recovery key portal. I am logged on as tim.mintner@tanium.com. So if I just do a search for fake in this particular case, because I've got all of those keys, then I can see only those keys that are associated with my user ID. So if I click on retrieve my recovery key, I can grab that. I can again copy this out. I can see the ID. And so if I am in a case where I've got, say, 4 or 5 different machines, and I might need to match up that recovery key ID, I have that available so that I can use that as a method of matching those.
Wow. This is amazing. Um, Absolutely amazing. I'm just kind of stunned looking at all this because this took a lot to pull this off and make it so you're right. It feels really seamless for the end user.
Yeah, that's our goal. Is we really want to make this as easy as possible, especially like if we run into another, say, a global security or global outage event where those keys need to be retrieved and very quickly by large numbers of people. We wanted to make this as simple as possible for either the end users or the help desk staff in order to get the keys. And so you'll notice as well that we've provided the ability to do exports of the recovery keys within the console as well. And so if you do have an incident where I need to get all of the keys for my particular location and enter those into the systems very quickly, I can do a quick export and have that list available.
As I was getting ready for the show, I'm and getting ready to talk about our new user community. I literally just saw that question in the community today. So that is powerful. And wink, wink, being kind to our industry peers, we were saying if there's just so happens to be another global outage for customers around the world who need suddenly to get all their BitLocker stuff, now they can do that, and their users can do that very easily. Wow, that is very helpful, very responsible to the industry.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so now I'm going to go back to what you had asked a little bit earlier and show you some of the new capabilities that we've got within creating the BitLocker policy itself. So I go under my policy configurations here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new policy. Now, this is not fully released yet, so I'm showing you some capabilities that we are in process of working on right now. So right now, we've got two different policies. So I've got a BitLocker and what we're calling BitLocker V2 with that beta logo at the end of it. Now, when we actually release this, what will happen is this BitLocker V2 with the beta will become BitLocker, and the existing BitLocker will become BitLocker Legacy. And so we wanted to make the transition from one policy type to the other policy type completely under the control of our Tanium administrators. We are changing quite a few things under the covers in order to improve resilience, in order to make sure that we don't lose keys. And so because we're making those changes under the covers, we want to let you to make sure that you test this out over time and choose to adopt the new capabilities as you see fit. So let me go ahead and go into the new BitLocker policy. So there's always been two interesting aspects of creating a BitLocker policy. There's one aspect that says, all right, I want to encrypt the disk. So I have to worry about the encryption of the disk. And then you also have all the other general group policy settings that need to be set on that endpoint. And that was, I'm not going to lie, it was a real pain to do that in the past with our previous policy. So what we want to do is provide a single place to configure both the encryption portion of the BitLocker as well as the additional policy settings that you might need. So
Wow.
you can,
I'm just thinking you're right. It was kind of a bit of a scavenger hunt previously to find all these different settings all over the policies and go back into your generalized policies as well as so it sounds like you've just pulled all that into the BitLocker interface.
absolutely, yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you can see here, this top portion just deals with the encryption. So I can choose, what my encryption strength will be. I can choose how often I want to rotate my recovery keys. And so, like by default here, we're recommending that you do this, say, every 45 days, but you can change this. We've got some customers that never want to rotate their keys, but you can go as high as 120 days on how often you want to rotate their keys. It's interesting, a lot of customers don't rotate their keys today because they don't have a good mechanism to set up to do that sort of key rotation. And because we're doing this all kind of behind the scenes, we're sending out the action, we're telling the endpoint, hey, after you receive this policy, there's a clock, and 45 days from now, I'm going to rotate the key, and then I want you to escrow that new key up to that endpoint. And then we've also added in the capability to do your fixed data drives and removable data drives inside of here. So our fixed data drives, we can say, I want to do a full disk, or I just want to encrypt my used disk space. And my removable disk drives, again, do I want to do my full disk or used disk space only on these particular drives? Now, one key thing, and I want to make sure I call this out, is if we see a fixed data drive, so that's just an extra drive assigned to that Windows device, we will fully encrypt that particular device. The only thing that's unique is removable data drives. We won't necessarily encrypt that particular device. We will basically prompt you that you need to encrypt that device. And we're going to basically set the setting to say, I want to either do this full or use disk space.
And when you say "we" there in air quotes, that's
Yeah,
basically Windows policy. That's not Tanium. That's just the policy that we're affecting on the endpoint would do that anyway, right?
absolutely. That's
Okay.
correct. Yep. So that's managing the encryption, but there's a lot of other additional BitLocker settings that you might want to set on an endpoint. So we've added this area under here. So if you're a new Windows administrator, you want to roll out BitLocker encryption, you want to get up and running very quickly, you can just come in, you can configure that I want to do my operating system drives, I want to do, say, TPM only, and use disk space and give this a name, save it, and deploy it. And I have a fully functioning BitLocker deployment for my endpoints. But for the more advanced users that want to control more granular aspects of BitLocker policy, we've added the ability to do these additional BitLocker settings. So you can see inside of here, if you want to configure things like secure boot for integrity validation, or configure TPM platform validation for BIOS-based firmware configuration. So these are more advanced BitLocker policy settings that you can set on these particular for your particular endpoints. And so you can configure these as much as you need. This also gives you a little bit of a sneak peek of kind of where we're going with our user interface for the rest of our policy. So just something to watch. So you can see here we can filter. Do I want to look at just settings that are configuration service providers, or do I want to look at LGPO or see all of them? Do I want to filter based on settings that are enabled or not configured? So we've added some capabilities inside of here that you're going to start to see that show up in more places within the Enforce console.
Oh man, you're gonna be a popular guy at Converge next year because there's gonna be a bunch of people who want to give you a big high five for how easy you've made this. Yes.
Cool. And then lastly is we've had the capability for a long time to do end user notifications. So one of the challenges of doing BitLocker on endpoints is often it requires a reboot in the process, and you don't want to necessarily just reboot out from under a user. And so we take advantage of end user notifications within Tanium in order to put your own customized message that you want to set whenever you're doing the encryption. And then that will prompt the user and let them know that, hey, you need to reboot the machine in order to continue the process. And they can choose to go ahead and do that at that point in time, or delay that. If I were to choose TPM plus PIN, and notice here I've got some additional settings, like I can define my pen length. I can do what we call an enhanced pin, which makes it a little bit more secure. When I do that, then you can also see I can also configure some additional end user notification settings for setting the pin. And what a pin is if I encrypt my disk, then when I boot up, I want the user to have to enter in a PIN, which is an alphanumeric value, in order to say that, yep, this is my device, and then it will unlock the hard drive and let it boot up. And so we allow you to prompt the user for that particular PIN and let it set. So that's kind of the new policy. Like I said, we want to allow you to leverage this and take advantage of this as you feel comfortable to do so. We've made a lot of changes under the scene. We used to use a combination of Python code and C++ code, and there was some issues at times. I remember I talked about edge cases. There were issues at times in some environments where that handoff wasn't super smooth. And so now everything is a native C++ application completely through the stack, much more resilient. And we also look for conditions like we have had a number of customers that say they want to target based on encryption status. Well, if for some reason WMI is messed up or something like that, an encryption status may fall out of scope. And then in that particular case, their BitLocker policy no longer applies to that system. And then in the past, what would happen is they would fix the endpoint, the policy would get applied again, and then we would rotate the key again. And so now we've got logic in there to say, hey, like we know that this is a system where BitLocker has been managed previously, and we already have a recovery key for it. So we're just going to continue to use that particular recovery key. We're not going to force a new recovery key on that particular endpoint.
Well, I have a few questions.
Yeah.
The more you talk, the more questions I have. So, number one, you just talked about status. Are there, I know we've had BitLocker sensors for years. Are there new
Yes.
sensors or reports that we can use to now that we've set up the policy and gotten this out there, how can we, because all of our jobs require reporting to management. What's the
Yeah.
progress? What's the status, right? So, how do we get that data?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that we had previously in the previous iteration of this is we would report the success of the policy of being applied and not necessarily report the success of the encryption process. So remember when I said there's kind of two aspects to a BitLocker policy. There's the encryption portion and then there's the policy portion of it. So in the past, if our policy applied, we're like, yep, we're all good. We did good. But the disk could have never encrypted. And so we could be looking at a situation where you've got success all the way down the line, but you don't have encrypted disk on the endpoint. And so now, whenever we apply a policy on an endpoint, we look at both the encryption status as well as whether or not that policy applied. And so we will not show success unless both of those values happen to be true on that particular endpoint. So we're getting more granular. And so a lot of our sensors are the same as they were in the past. However, the data is much more consistent than what we had in the past.
So, can you show us those sensors?
Yeah, well, I tell you what I will do is I will look specifically at a BitLocker v2 policy. We've tried to make this relatively boring. So, but if you can see here, I've got an enforcement. And in this particular enforcement, I have one that's fully applied, and I've got one that's partially applied. And so in this particular case, and I know this because this is our test environment, the one that has been applied is a case where we've successfully applied both the policy and the disk encryption portion. For the one here that says partially applied, the reason why this one is partially applied is, and I don't have this fully wired up to show you the details of this right now, but the reason why this is partially applied is because in this particular case, we told it to encrypt both the operating system drive and a fixed data drive, and the fixed data drive did not encrypt. And so we're showing partially applied because we only did half of that particular setting on that. And so you'll definitely see more as we get closer to release, and we're not too far away. But as you get closer to release, you'll see more information about the additional data that we expose here.
And if I click view details under the target there, does that take me to like an interact pivot or? Okay, it just
You'll,
shows me right there. Okay.
yeah, it shows me in this particular case, I'm targeting to specific endpoints and
Hmm.
limiting that to my all windows. So, yeah,
Okay. Next question I have, a bit of a curveball.
yeah,
Obviously, this is Windows BitLocker. We also do Mac FileVault, and
yes.
most of this is all really, I mean, Windows is very specific. There's not really any shared technology there. I know we've done Mac FileVault for years as well. Are there any enhancements, and does any of this apply, like the reporting or interface or anything for Mac FileVault?
Yeah, great question. So there are a few things that apply specifically to Mac FileVault. And one, the recovery keys page here, you can see here that I have that view. So again, the management rights capabilities, that all falls under um, both FileVault and BitLocker. And then the same holds true for the end user encryption key recovery portal. The reason why we call this encryption key recovery portal and not BitLocker recovery portal is because you can retrieve not only your BitLocker recovery keys, but you can also retrieve your FileVault recovery keys from here as well.
Oh my goodness, man. You have made wow. I'm just thinking, yeah, you just didn't even bother to mention that earlier. We're on this page like, yeah, it does Mac too. Wow. All right, another question. And you and I are both ex-Microsoft employees. We love our Microsoft partners. And a lot of our folks watching this are using Intune today. So we want to be kind to people make choices in technology for one reason or another, and Intune's perfectly capable of doing a lot of this. But what's the differentiation here? Why would somebody choose to use Tanium to manage their BitLocker in place of Intune?
Yeah, great question. And like I just want to clarify this because I get asked this quite a bit. They're like, can I use both? And I want to say right off, please don't use both at the same time. You'll end up causing rotation issues both within Intune and both in Tanium, and you'll get into what we affectionately refer to as a slap fight with the policies, and you'll end up with many different recovery keys. So please don't use both. So choose the one that makes the most sense to you. Now, um, the the advantage that we have with Intenium is we are really agnostic to the rest of the management of that particular device. So you can be part of Intune, you can be not be part of Intune, you can be as part of Active Directory, you can be part of Azure Entra ID, and you could be part of you could have many different Entra ID environments. I think I've talked to some customers recently that they have about 5 or 6 Entra ID environments. They have 5 or 6 Intune instances. And so if they were to manage BitLocker using their Intune, using their Entra ID, they would have to go into each one of those tenants, configure that particular policy, and then when they're viewing their keys, they have to remember, oh, this user is in this particular Entra ID tenant, and I need to go view that key. Because we're kind of agnostic of that, like you can manage it all through the one interface, and then we can pull all your keys, no matter how the rest of the device is managed.
Man, that's huge. Specifically like mergers, acquisitions. Back in the day, I remember, the group policy, you'd have multiple forests, multiple domains. It's just a headache. And that's why people prefer Enforce as a single management plane. And now just because that management plane is moved to the cloud and it's fragmented there, depending on how your company is implemented, this does make sense to simplify that management plane. So we're not allowed to say when this stuff, the beta pieces are gonna. So what can you tell us about? Okay, what's live now and what's coming very soon?
Yeah, great question. So what is live right now that you can take advantage of immediately is the management rights and this view of the recovery keys. So that was released a couple of months ago. The end user, encryption key recovery portal will be released. We are in final stages of testing, so soon is whenever that will be available. And then the BitLocker V2, we are finishing up our testing there. So we're hoping to release that within a few months. I hope to be faster than that, but I don't want to get in trouble. But we are really close to releasing all of this capability. So just stay tuned, and we'll let you know when it's ready.
Well, Tim, this is super exciting. I say this frequently on the show. There's multiple times as I'm watching us thinking there have to be admins standing up and cheering in front of their computer because there's just so much that you've simplified with this administration for BitLocker and a little bit of FileVault there too. So thank you. And I know you are representing a big team of developers and testers and people who are behind the scenes making this happen. So I want to communicate thanks to our engineering org for all they've put in here. And thank you, customers who are watching this, who have given us this feedback. Some of it's pretty obvious feedback, right? But you can see that we've really delivered here. So as we wrap up, Tim, any final closing comments you want to leave people with?
Again, thank you to our dev team has been incredible. They've really embraced this and they've really thought about the resilient aspect. And so this has taken a good amount of time to develop because like this is not a scenario where we want to fall down and that we want to make a mistake. And so you can guarantee that like this has gone through the utmost level of testing and before we've released it to our customers, even in a beta state, it's gone through an incredible amount of testing. I do want to thank our customers. We've had some customers that have stuck with us through many different scenarios where they're looking at moving off other encryption platforms, moving to us, and working through scenarios of artifacts being left over from other tools that were on the endpoint. And so thank you for your feedback. Thank you for sticking with us.
Well, Tim, thanks for bringing this good news to us today on Tanium Tech Talks. And as usual, folks, at the end of every show, you know there are some links in the show notes below in the description here of the video on YouTube. So there's a link to that new Tanium community experience that we talked about at the beginning, migrating BitLocker to Tanium Enforce. How do we do that? We've got a knowledge article for that. Docs on just BitLocker policy administration, and then also on Windows encryption management. And obviously, once you hit those links into the docs, there's lots of things to explore there. So we've got all that for you together with this show today. It should give you most of what you need to really get going with this. And if you're on-prem, again, you know, our semi-annual release process, you'll see this come later. So look for that in the release notes for that semi-annual release process. So boy, wow, what a show. This is so exciting. And I hope you're excited too. As always, let us know what you think. Talk to your account team or in the community. Again, that's a place where you can interact with us and others who are going through the same thing. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Tanium Tech Talks. Until next time, go Tanium.